It. That's all I care.
Howdy, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective, where I am calm, cool, and collected.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Not too
Very
bad,
good.
right? And you know what else is collected? When people like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. That helps us know how many people are watching and all those good things. You get your little email every day. Solid day. So we have a whole bunch of comments right off the bat. Seb had a topic that he wanted to bring up, and in case y'all don't know, this is not the room that I normally am in. So this is a hotel room.
It doesn't look familiar.
No, and I'm all cowboyed up because I'm going to go do some cowboy stuff, and it's going to be a good day.
You look good though, buddy. I mean,
actually,
what I like about the posture that you've got going right now is it's not your usual slumping in your basement stance.
Mm-hmm.
All slumped down in your chair like you're about to watch Netflix. But now with you got some square shoulders going. You look like you're about to brief the entire planet, and I like it.
All right, everybody, listen up.
Don't get crazy.
Yeah, so well, let's jump into a topic here in a second, but I do have I just want to hit all this real fast. Jassa, good morning. Winterstorm, good morning. He's live from Tofino. Good to know.
Nice, buddy.
Morning, Jassa. Morning, Winter. Oh, right. Where is Daniel? Where is Daniel? I'm here, just driving.
These guys.
Perfect.
You guys need to get a room.
I love it though, man. Don't you love it? I love it.
It's awesome. Yeah.
I'm kind of a little disappointed when it doesn't pop off a little bit, you know?
It is a little bit, right? Jassa driving to Minneapolis. He's asking, who stole your scarf? My schmog. Yes. So my schmog is actually tied into my boom arm. And I didn't want to bring my whole boom arm to the hotel, so I brought my little stand. So no.
You would have schlumped if you'd have brought your boom arm.
Oh, yes.
I wouldn't have been able to appreciate your shoulders.
It's true. It's very true. And then Daniel says, the professional cowboy. And no, I am not a professional. Don't worry. We'll be, I'm hoping if Amber's not too busy, because she usually likes to help, she's going to be my camera woman, hopefully. Or I might wrangle somebody else in, and we'll take a whole bunch of photos and put them up on the IG so everybody can enjoy. Although you won't get the smell of burning cow hair and skin at the same time. It's a very, I mean, you know what it's like, Shaun. You've done it before. It's a distinct smell. Yeah. So,
and you don't forget it.
No, you don't. Especially the first time you get it right in the face, that whole smoke cloud that just like sits in and amongst your face. It's pretty, it's a rough one.
But you know what's interesting? This is not going to be our topic today. Our topic today is what Seb wants. That is the topic for today, whatever it is, because I know it's going to be way better than burning cow stuff.
Yes.
So I will say this, though. You're talking about something that is an uncomfortable topic for quite a few people out there because they don't like to think about where their meat comes from. They believe that it comes in a saran wrapped package that was grown in the supermarket.
Yes, exactly.
But that's not where it comes from. And so our connection with our food supply has become so disconnected that it's uncomfortable for people to consider the things that you have just mentioned now and will show maybe photos of later. I think it's important.
I agree.
And I think it's important that it's done well, though. So there's no way that you can introduce people to the connection to the food supply if you just put it all up in their face and trying to get all mega hard on it, like, yeah, branding. Look at the searing motion right now. It's got to be tasteful. It's got to be not too offensive. It's got to be like almost a segue into here's reality, but not full reality, you know?
Yeah.
And beyond that, we need, as humanity, like we need to start looking at ways, obviously, to make these things more humane, right? You can't do it for 100 years and be like, well, that's what we've been doing for 100 years. It's like, well, if we did that with everything else, know, so I'm in 100%. I just like, obviously, ethical conduct when it comes to animals, right? Like just have some sort of,
it's a great posture, point. It's a really great point, and we should never lose sight of these kind of things. To your point, we should constantly be evolving as a species with the other species around us. I mean, we're not cavemen savages.
Yeah. The key thing, I think, especially for ranch life, farm life, things like that, is that I think a lot of times is overlooked, is that yes, it's true that the calves and the harvest that's where people get their money when they're working in a ranch or on a farm. But the thing is that these are all their animals. Like it's not a completely disconnected emotional state of just like, oh, okay, here we go, another one. No, they actually care. Like my aunt and uncle have been running this ranch basically their whole lives. My uncle grew up on the ranch. That's been his whole life. My granddad before him ran that ranch his whole life, right? And they both have the same mentality of the fact that they want to do it more efficiently, more humanely, so that the animals are better, just because it affects the meat. Right?
Does.
Like when I go hunting, I don't want to make the animal suffer. I want to be able to put it down cleanly and humanely as quickly as possible, which is the cleanest way that an animal is going to grow out in the wild, because it affects the meat first off, but also because I care about the animal. So that's it's part of it. And I think it gets forgotten a lot that these ranchers who are, I think sometimes can be looked at a little bit down people's noses. They actually care. They care about every single one of those animals.
Now, hang on a sec.
At least the ones I know.
That's right. Let's tease the details out there. When you say they all care, no, that's not true.
That's true.
Well,
That's
some
very true.
care. Some care and some don't. And so it's our job to determine who does care and who doesn't, and then support the ones who do care so that it promotes the act of caring.
Yeah. Or if not, at least the act of operationalizing that care, which is what do I have to do for people to come to me? And if that means having more humane practices or whatever the case may be, then let's make that happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is we won't get too deep into the details of how it all goes down, because
yes, please, let's not.
Challenging for some people,
and we actually don't need to.
And we don't need to.
Squirming.
It's still squirming. But I think the key point of this is that, again, the things that seem humane when you don't actually have, we've never been there, never actually seen it happen, never watched it go down. It can be even more traumatic for the animal to be like the humane way to make it easier for me as a person to look at it happening and go, yeah, I don't really like the way that's going down. But when you look at somebody that has the experience, who's been doing it their whole life, and go like, yeah, no, we've tried the other ways. We've tried this way. We've tried this way. We've tried this way. We've tried this way. This is the most efficient and most healthy way for the animal for this to happen. Okay.
Yeah. When we talk about humane treatment, I'm not talking about as established by Seb Lavoie. I'm talking about, professionals in the field, obviously, that have the knowledge to establish that. And this is no different than what use of force looks to the untrained eye, for example. It's always
that's a great point,
right? And so I make it's a very valid analogy, because you can make the correlation very easily. It's easy to be an armchair quarterback. You don't know anything. You're just watching,
Yeah.
Now, I'm happy to bypass the topic that I'm about to present as a possibility.
Go ahead.
I'm happy to do whatever topic you guys want. But what you just said, Seb, I've noticed a trend.
Yes.
You noticing a trend?
So we all know that there's a thing going on out there. This is a tiny little slice of a topic, but it refers to so many other topics broadly. The idea being that, of course, Seb, you have a very keen eye for use of force, or the policing or law enforcement industry. You understand that as well as anyone that I know. I look to you for answers in respect to Leo scenarios when it comes to self-defense and whatnot, use of force. And I've noticed, of course, that from time to time, you do post up videos that are excellent demonstrations of how not to do it. And you also post up some examples of how to do it. But predominantly, you put up examples from time to time. It's not you're not raging against the machine. You put them up tastefully. You put up videos that are or should be embarrassing to all parties involved. And that's to include all the way up the chain, right through to the top of the institution, whoever that individual is representing at the time.
Mhm.
And yet, I find that there's not really much engagement in the sense of we really have to change our ways. We really have to do this better. It's so evident that it's being done poorly, and yet it continues to be done poorly. What does it take?
Mhm.
What would you have to double, triple, quadruple your output of shining a spotlight on? What does it take?
So look, we're gonna launch into this. This is something that's extremely close to my heart. You know, like I've been passionate about combatives and training and getting people ready for use of force encounters for a variety of different reasons, but it affects a lot more than them. It affects their career, it affects their families, and it affects the people that we're actually that are having a bad day that we have to go after. And not all those people are going to be having bad days forever. Some of them will be, and if the use of force is causing, you know, permanent injuries, or if they end up in a situation that escalates so much on account of having lost control, now how many lives are screwed up? And you can sit here and be like, well, that's their choice. Okay, dude, like, listen, mistakes are made in life, and that is life. If you can control somebody that's having a really bad day, and I'm not talking about somebody that's a career criminal. I mean, even that, you still have to be a professional. But I'm referring to other people. There's a ton of other people,
everyday man,
everyday people, right? That just are having a bad day, and now they end up dealing with cops. We as a society, we have a duty to be as good as we possibly can be to maximize everybody's safety, including the people we arrest, period. And that's just the way it should be. There's also a responsibility to a certain extent to control optics, right? So how it's done matters. I'm not saying, I had a conversation with a guy in my DM a few days ago talking about striking and all those things, and members are very scared of striking now, and they will endanger their safety on account of not striking. And that is a very dangerous road to go down. If you are in a position where strikes are necessary to prevent an escalation, so you are escalating your use of force to de-escalate the situation, by all means, go ahead. No hesitation, decisiveness, and accountability, right? You don't have a choice. But if that choice became your only choice on account of the fact that you don't know how to use positional control, and you don't know how to use your hips connected to somebody else, you don't know how to control their arms, then there's a problem. And that problem needs to be identified, and it needs to be remedied. You do not fight if you don't train to fight, period. That's it. Do not expect to rise up to the occasion. You're going to fall off to the level of training that you're at. And if that is nil, your ability to fight are nil. And I don't care what you did in the schoolyard, on the hockey rink, or whatever. Arresting someone that doesn't want to be is a completely different beast.
Oh yeah.
And you need to have a very strong base in positional control. You need to have the ability to sustain the hits as you're coming in. You need to have takedown strategies. You need to have all those things work together. And you need self-control, and controlled aggression, and you need decisiveness, and all those things are coming by way of doing it over and over and over again. And so, on that diatribe, for the last 20 years, I've been training. I've been training cops and been out doing this full time. I created our ERT first program for the Lower Mainland team. I mean, and I was the combatives lead for the entire time I was on the team, which was 12 years. And we did scenario-based training. We rolled combatives into our scenarios. Our guys were on the mats. They were doing what they need to do to be at the level they need to be at. Anyways, so what we are seeing and what is trending, and the contention that I have is this: when you look at the videos that I post that are depicting law enforcement losing control of suspects or whatever the case may be, I have found that I would have some people that are cops in my followers that would actually look and either like or even look at the story, at some of the stories before and after, but they will purposefully skip the combative piece. So what's happening here is, if you're not doing something and you've you're outcome biased because so far you've had no experience to correlate, a problem executing use of force in the context of your job. You become outcome biased and you think that because you do something right, this doesn't happen. And that is a big pretension, and it is absolutely inaccurate. What you are is lucky. That's all.
Yeah.
Right?
Lucky in a narrow field.
100%. And so now what's happening is what we're seeing is willful blindness to it. Like, it doesn't matter how much you post. Like, there's a lot of cops out there that actually will not. And what they will do is they will start seeking other people that say, oh, jiu-jitsu is useless, or this is useless, or whatever. And then they will jump on that bandwagon and say, oh, well, this guy here says that, but the thing is this, and I say this all the time, nobody, not a single cop I've ever worked with rolled on the mats or did some combatives with me and said, and didn't say, holy Jesus, I don't know anything. I don't know what I'm doing. It's, and none of those people that are consistently complaining or consistently detracting either jiu-jitsu, or because jiu-jitsu is not, it's not the whole thing. Like, combatives and policing, it's a whole thing. It starts with the application of proper TTPs and all those things. I mean, I can talk about this all day, but we are sort of looking at, once you went hands-on, you're looking for a reaction and you're looking to affect an arrest positively, that piece in space and time, they will literally do everything to pretend that they don't need help. But then they will come and train with you and be like, holy, I can't believe how much I don't know. Okay, so now you went from being unconsciously incompetent to being consciously incompetent, but yet where's the training occurring here? So I always say it, I always said it, and I always will say it. From an organizational standpoint, these organizations need to recognize the need. They need to recognize that the training has to be provided and that the training has to be a part of your daily activities, period. You can't be like, we're going to work these guys 4 shifts of 12 hours. We're going to rotate them out for 4 days. We're going to do, like, there has to be, maybe you're running your numbers higher on account. And I'm talking about, this is not like utopian ideas here. To run the numbers higher, you need a lot of money. And to get the money, you need to convince the people, and you convince the people. And it's a difficult thing, because how do you convince people that you need something if nothing is happening? Because policing is exactly that. You cannot quantify what isn't happening. So it's very difficult to go to the population and say, look, guys, if we train our people better, we're going to, so it's that constant balancing act, right? So, but if we could, in an ideal world, if we could have, say, 3 rotations or 3 shifts on rotations instead of 2, one working night shift, one working day shift, you could have 1 day, 1 night, 1 training, right? Or you could inversely, you could say, well, we're gonna overlap the shifts, and for 2 hours during your shift, you're gonna go and do combatives, provided that you're not stuck with and in custody somewhere, or whatever the case may be, and you cannot be relieved. So once they take it out of the individual to make the decision, and they actually do it organizationally, where it's just a part of the job, fitness and combatives, then you are paid to train.
Yeah.
And that's part of your duties, and it's closely interwoven into your operational readiness package. And guess what? That's what you're doing. I've seen organizations do that. And if they're smaller in size, oftentimes it works really, really good. Like, there's organizations in the States, I can't remember the name of it, unfortunately, but one of them, the chief's a black belt, and 2 of his lieutenant are brown belts, and their entire sort of squadron, like, I think there's like 18 people or something. The minimum is a blue belt. Man, beauty. Like, you don't need 18 black belt at all. You don't, because the majority of the people you'd be fighting on the streets do not have the ability, that we encounter on the mats, for example, although some do. So you have to prepare for that. Anyways, and so it is just absolutely an aberration to me. And the arguments that are coming out, man, I had a guy last week post something about jiu-jitsu, and you know what? He's actually a good guy, and I always respected him. But he posted something about jiu-jitsu, like, this won't work because I'm just gonna eye poke and do this and that. I'm like,
Who's going to see red?
yeah, exactly. I'm like, dude, like,
You don't know my mentality, bro.
what prevents the person that actually trains to eye poke you? You know, like, okay, so if we want to go eye poke to eye poke, let's talk about that. Like, there's nothing that you can do that he can't do. But in addition to this, he'll have the positional control. He'll have the ability to effectively control your body to the point where you've lost complete control of it. You know,
Actually, to the point where you're controlling that human so well that I'm going to eye poke them with their own finger.
Right.
Bro, I'm going to eye poke you all day long
Yeah.
with your own hand.
I was just thinking about the fact that like the amount of actual work it would take to not only fight someone off, but then be like, you know what, I'm going to poke you in the eye, and then find the find the eye with the finger and find the like just no, that's not happening. I think you bring up a great point. It actually ties in quite well with ranching and farming and stuff like that. Is that it's a disconnect. There's a disconnect between the people and what they understand of violence, because it's not a normal thing for the average person, especially in North America. Not anymore. It used to be, but it's not there anymore. And there's actually Jassa made a comment here that kind of ties into this, and he says less animals on farms, more care, more animals, less care, and that is a fallacy.
Right? No,
I don't think so,
right, man. Kind of
because it comes down to the farmer, it comes down to the rancher, and if
it does.
If they're going to put the care in, same thing with the officer, right? Is that if they care about it,
they're making the choice to have less on the farm it creates more care. That's the person and their guiding light on how they want to run their life. If that's the reason why they did it. That's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, I know guys here that have thousands of acres. You're talking thousands of cattle, and they have the same level of care as the if not better level of care than someone who has 200 head.
Well, then they're busy.
And they are busy, but they have staff,
they have money,
and they have regulations, and they have the money, and they have the length of time in the industry that they have the efficiency built into it. So there's capabilities there. I mean, if you were to look at, say, that police squadron of 12, 13, 14, 15 people versus the entire Lower Mainland ERT team, right? ERT team, the ERT, then the numbers are skewed one way or the other, right? You have more people Lower Mainland, RCMP, ERT, great. But the level of care doesn't always have to be different just because there's more people.
Well, no, but yes, in the sense that if you look at an organization like the RCMP, it has 26,000 members right now. Look at NYPD, has around 36,000 members, right? That's one city in the States. And so if you look at a reasonable policing budget in one of those cities, or even for us as a national organization, you are looking at astronomical cost increase if you add 200 a head, a year, and 200 wouldn't be what would be added if you were to create these programs. And so somehow something has to be done and some of it has been done to have enough data to be able to go in front of city council and go in front of higher leadership and have these conversations. Like, look, you have to factor in that any use of force that is ineffective has the appearance of an excessive force and likely will lead into injuries. Now, if you start tallying how much this is going to cost you from a litigation standpoint, you're not going to have an exact number because you don't know what didn't happen and what happened. But what you can do is establish data on what happened, right? Like, so over the course of the last 10 years, for example, we've had X amount of litigations. We paid out $18 million, for example. Now, what we're asking to do and what we want to do is to inject $9 million, say annually or over the course of like 3 years, so that we can implement a training schedule, which is built into operational readiness package for the patrol officers or anybody who's in a frontline position and will have to deal with. And you can prioritize. You can say, look, if you're a carpet cop in an office, which I was for the last 2 years of my service, and your chances of even finding your gun to go anywhere are very slim. Well, you know what? let's train the frontline members, those that are out there doing the work day in and day out. Let's start there. Let's prioritize them. And so there are ways to make things happen, but you need to buy into it, and you need to overcome the stigma associated with, well, if we increase training, we're going to increase violence in our members. They're going to be more prone to use of force. Wrong. It's a complete opposite.
Yeah.
It's the complete opposite. The more prepared and the better your cops are in the combative realms, the less likely they are to use it. And if they do use it, the less likely they are to cause substantial injuries. And there's data, there's plenty of data to back that up. And so you have the stress inoculation piece also, which means that generally the person that's stress inoculated to hand-to-hand combat, their heart rate does not necessarily elevate at the level at which somebody else would in a given set of circumstances, which often leads to I don't want to say an overestimation of risk, because that's the risk that they perceive, so therefore it's correct, right? But if you were to look at it with some detachment, you would know that had you been at the level at which you should have been, you wouldn't have assessed the risk the way you had, period, during a given incident. And those are all things that have to be factored in. But man, the cost of litigation, the cost of injuries, the cost of lawsuits, the cost of okay, so those two guys,
Dude, how about this? The cost of psychological damage to the people who are saying, no, we're not going to spend that dollar.
Yep.
Like if you're controlling the purse strings right now and you don't want to open them up to make every police service across all of Canada better, good luck sleeping well tonight.
Yeah.
And if you're sleeping well tonight, if you get a chance to hear what I'm just about to say, I hope you don't sleep well tonight, because you shouldn't be. You should be opening those purse strings and executing to a higher level.
I couldn't agree more, man. And that includes having the proper numbers on the road, because training is one piece of this. But if your members are all overworked and the numbers are running, because the average police force, and I'm not going to spew out random stats, but when I was in office, the average police force had a 30% vacancy rate or something stupid, where they should have had 20 members on the road, and there was 12 or 14 or 15 or 16, and that is unacceptable. That's an extra drain on resources, but the job is happening anyways, because guys and girls are out there and they're like, you know what, let's do this. So it's a vicious cycle, because they actually will not stop doing the work on account of the catastrophic consequences of doing that. Like, you and I couldn't be like, you know what, screw it, we'll just take our time. We're supposed to have 2 more guys, and it's like this, all of a sudden
we're just going to work twice as hard.
We are, because we know that we cannot, like, it's just, and so it goes into a giant kind of thing. But this is organizational, that's external. Members themselves as individuals, they need to understand this. They simply need to understand this. Your organization not being there to back you up won't matter when you are dying on the street, or when you're killing a suspect because you couldn't control him, or when you end up on YouTube with 18 million views. You think that doesn't affect your career?
Good luck.
There's been cops in the States, after being exposed during a combatives incident, their careers was over and they couldn't get hired anywhere. Right? Yeah. There is heavy consequences to this. And imagine if you have even a little bit of incline for external validation, wait until the entire world is reposting your thing. And so if you do what you can, and you train, and you invest yourself in it, and things go pear-shaped anyway, at least you have the peace of mind of knowing that you've done everything you could. Sometimes the odds are just stacked against you and things happen. We all know that. But if you haven't done everything you could and it happens, that's not on the organization, that's on you. That job requires you to be able to do something that you need to train for. It's not a miraculous skill set.
Yeah. So I've got a couple of things to say on that, and I agree with all of that, buddy. You know that. But the first thing that comes to mind is for anyone who just listened to you, if they know you, they might shrug their shoulders and think, yeah, but like Seb as being a BJJ guy for X amount of years and it takes so long. And what's the point? Why should I even start? It just takes too long. I'll say this, that I've been doing martial arts for over 40 years, and I've only been doing BJJ for 8 years. For 32 years, I was all right. I could take care of myself. I did pretty well. But when I first got on the BJJ mats, I quickly learned that there's an entire aspect of controlling human beings that I didn't understand as well as I could have. And I started off with judo, so I understand base posture structure and how to do this and that. But on the ground or up against a wall or up against a car, it's an entirely different skill that you can only understand once you start doing it. And so it was very apparent to me quickly that I had a big gap in my personal space that I needed to improve on. And so if you're listening to this and you think BJJ don't work, it doesn't until you get on the mats and understand that it works. It requires a commitment to go question yourself on, is this a thing or not? And I can assure you it's a thing. The second piece is, if I ran Canada, if I
Shaun for PM.
Are you announcing something?
No. In fact, I'll do the other side of it. I will never. If I ran Canada, or if I ran every police service in Canada, or if I had my way, and I've never given this any thought. This was just a random idea that popped into my head that makes sense to me right now. That, Seb, you can easily shoot it down because it's a dumb idea. But this is what I would do. Every single police service in the country would show up for their shift at whatever time, just as they always have. And for the first 10 minutes, they train. They get all geared up, full gear, whatever. You're a driver, you're a this, you're a that, whatever your role is. For the first 10 minutes of your shift, you train, and it looks like this. You're taught how to do it by a mobile team that moves across the country and explains to the in-service members in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, or wherever that this is how this first 10 minutes is done. And you can assign 2 little office rooms. You can assign a closet. You can assign a garage. You can assign whatever as the training area. But there's a couple of rooms at the minimum. One room is you spend 5 minutes in there. You walk in the door, and it's the tools room. That's where you use your use of force tools. You use your baton, you use your spray, you go through the drills. You're not spraying anything, you're not hitting anything. You're dry drawing, and you're using all of your tools to get your freaking head in the game. And then the other room is the no tools game, where there's someone that is resisting or whatever, and you've got to learn how to control someone up against a wall just for a couple of minutes. Now, if nobody's ever been full gear and try to pin someone against a wall or a car or whatever for even 2 minutes, good luck. You'll tap yourself out after 60 seconds because you don't know what you're doing. You'll run out of oxygen because you're being a spaz. You'll have all kinds of ideas, and they'll quickly erode within about 15 seconds when you realize how hard it is to control a human. Repetition, consistency, every single day. If that's your job every day, train for your job every day. 10 minutes. That's what I would do.
I mean, obviously, there's going to be logistical challenges with making it that short. You know, you have your safety brief and all this stuff,
Yeah,
blah
for
blah
sure,
blah.
for
So,
sure.
but I know I'm catching what
understand the
you're
spirit.
saying. Yeah,
Mhm.
like, I mean, essentially, it doesn't need to be a 2-hour endeavor. It doesn't need
Not
to
at
be a
all.
4-hour endeavor. It could be a quick hit, and it's a part of what you are doing. And absolutely, it loads it sort of front loads your brain
loads.
for actions that you might be taking, actions that are so rare that when they do happen, there is a critical stall that's occurring because you haven't been doing it, and
It's
now
not
it happens,
autonomous.
and it's right in front of you, and it's not autonomous, right? So I agree with that.
I do remember every time we'd go to the range, before we'd hit the range, we'd do TTPs, right? You just, okay, everybody, load, unload, reload, right? And you just run through the drills, 5 or 6, it's all blank, or it's all empty anyway, but it's just to get your head in the game. And I think that's a great idea. But I have another thought on this, and it's actually from the other side, is that as a citizen, and we said this earlier, and I want to go back to it, was So it could just be a bad day, right? I don't know if you guys have watched the movie with Michael Douglas Falling Down, and how quickly psychological pressure can just eliminate any sort of morality that you have. And I'm not saying that everybody's like this, but the amount of pressure that can be piled on top of you very quickly in an urban setting, it can lead you down a pathway that, you were just having the worst day of your absolute life. And now the police are involved, and now they're yelling at you, and now you're yelling at them, and now it's all going sideways. And now they're on top of you. Well, personally, as a citizen, I would rather that the officer know what he's doing, because I don't want him to hurt me. I don't want to hurt him normally and outside of this situation, but on the outside of it, I don't want to hurt myself. And that's what's going to happen, right? Like, we're going to, if we engage and I'm up against Seb, well, he's going to control me. Doesn't matter what I do to him. He's going to control me, and he's going to throw me around and put me where I need to be in the utmost safest way that he knows how to do, based off of the totality of circumstances, as you like to say. But if it's somebody else that doesn't know anything, and all of a sudden I'm getting kicked in the face 17 times over and over and over and over again because I'm resisting, because I'm just having a really bad day and I'm freaking out and everybody's freaking out now. Like, think about that as well from a higher echelon side of it. If you have cops that are beating people that don't need to be beaten on their worst day already, you're just making everything worse. So it kind of behooves the citizenry as well to want your officers to know how to do this. It's almost so obvious. And there's a point here actually from the River Viking made a comment. He said, "I'm a registered fur trapper, and optics is everything. People hate it, but love Canada Goose. I'm as humane as possible with dispatching." And it's the same, I think, general concept is the fact that optics are optics. Yeah, it looks bad, but what would you rather have? Optics of an officer kicking the crap out of somebody? Or would you rather have optics of somebody very calmly controlling someone and putting them on the ground and putting cuffs on and putting them in a car?
Yeah, no, that's all extremely valid points. It's very frustrating. I would say, I've describe it as frustrating, I guess, for people that have invested so much time to try to help the membership and try to help organizations develop to a point where there is enough professionalism out there that we have to worry less about this, to have it taken 3 steps back every time that somebody starts spewing their mouth about the training not being valid or this being too dangerous or whatever the case may be. So every time that somebody posts is, in a cop world, post is about, a reluctance to train for whatever reason. Now there's 10 people that just got reconvinced that they do the right thing. And it's very easy to cater to those people because they're looking for things to corroborate the fact that they're doing the right thing by not preparing. And so it's very, very difficult to get them. And what's interesting with that too is I've actually invited guys. So I had a follower who's a black belt now, but at the time he wasn't. He was a brown belt or something, and he was putting some training for his watchmates, and they were engaged and all this stuff. Well, he had a supervisor, one rank above a corporal or something, basically tell him that this was all garbage, that they were not allowed to train, that he didn't want him to hurt the members because they would be short and all this stuff. And I basically said to him, I said, look, respectfully, I'm going to give that guy $5,000 if he can put his money where his mouth is. I'm going to fly over on my own dime. And I told him to extend the invitation. And do you think he took me on that? And I was 100% willing to do it. 100% willing to do it. I was on the next flight to go show him, because the problem is, and it's not about me showing how good I am, and it's not about me posturing and none of this, because I don't like to hurt people that don't necessarily need it. But the thing is, I wanted him to stop hurting potentially the watchmates and the people that are actually being shamed for spending the time training and getting better at this. You're destroying what we are trying to do here, which is make people more proficient. The problem with combatives is this: in Canada especially, it's very low occurrence, very high consequence, exactly like shootings, right? And so but unlike shootings, everybody knows that going to the range is the right thing to do in preparation for a very low probability event. But when you talk about use of force, they don't see that. The problem is this: we use of force all the time. All the time. It always happens, whereas we don't shoot all the time, right? And so I'm certainly not making an argument to stop shooting and start doing combatives. We obviously have to upkeep and even increase the amount of shooting that members are doing, associated with other things, obviously. But we need to get that combative piece where it needs to be, regardless of how low you perceive the risk to be, because the risk is actually quite high, and it's very regular.
The highest risk, as I see, is being exposed.
Oh yeah, that's a big risk, and it sucks.
Anyone out there who's reluctant to begin a training cycle called combatives, or anyone who's reluctant to support a training cycle called combatives, is reluctant because you don't understand it. You know that you'll be exposed if someone grabs a hold of you and you don't know what to do. Or more correctly, you grab a hold of someone who knows what they're doing and you can't control them. It's called being exposed, and it's really uncomfortable. Some people get right with it, and some people stick their head in the sand and pretend that didn't happen. But it does happen. And so what do you do with it? I mean, anyone that I know that I like that is righteous gets right with it and realizes that this is a shortcoming that I need to address as a professional within my industry. It doesn't, if you're a barista, if that's your industry and you don't know how to steam milk,
and you just hope no one orders a cappuccino.
Police officer and you don't know how to control another human, it's such a glaring hole in the skill set. It's maddening sometimes.
Willful exposure will prevent involuntary exposure. Willful exposure will. So take the time to willfully expose your shortcomings in a safe and controlled environment, and you will not be involuntarily exposed on YouTube or hurt, or and so for me it's about those two concepts and the acceptability associated with that. You need to know there is no other way to do it, dude. I can tell you this about cops, because this is what happens. I was at SHOT Show many years ago, and Chris Kyle was there, so that's before Chris Kyle passed. And there was a simulator. It was like kind of like FATS or Prism, like some of the firearm simulators. But this one was actually designed. The program that was utilized in there was a patrol-based program, and it was essentially police officers on the road with a carbine responding to a variety of different scenarios, and they would go around buildings, and you know how it is. It's kind of VR, like crazy, and they have to take the proper actions and deliver shots accurately and identify target identify properly, and all these principles. Well, there was a big lineup, and and everybody's in civvies, of course, so you don't know who's who in the zoo. There's a big lineup that was going around the corner. So I got in the lineup because I was wanting to try this thing. So we're moving forward. We get to me, and the guy asked me, "Okay, what's your name and what do you do?" So I told him, I said, "I'm a police officer. This is my name, all this stuff." He's like, "Wait, what?" Anyways, long story short, he tells me this. He goes, "There isn't a single cops in that line. They're all military."
Oh, wow.
They're all military. You think there's cops over there? Meanwhile, so let's take this aside. So this guy basically says, from my own observations, cops absolutely hate to be exposed. They absolutely hate to do it. Right?
Yeah, I agree.
And whereas the military people will go in there and they will just rag on each other and have fun with it.
Because we're used to it.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's it. And so he was surprised to see me in there. Now, I'm out there after being on the simulator, and I'm eating a meal with some friends, and I see 4 guys walk by. 2 of them are missing limbs. They have like Boston Bruins t-shirt with like a little, whatever hat, and they look like regular guys, but they obviously, you can tell they're all in good shape and all this stuff, but they're like very low key, right? Well, those guys were all soft guys. They were all guys that, were, because we're right in the middle of the Afghan campaign and Iraq campaign. I mean, these guys were hit hard, right? And so they're walking around. And then you see the same cops that were avoiding the lineup to go shoot this simulator walking around with like 47 pounds overweight.
All the gear on.
With a SWAT shirt on, tactical
sure.
this and tactical that. And I'm like, it was an absolute embarrassment. Like it was an absolute embarrassment. Like you are embarrassing. Like you're out of shape. You're posturing. You're puffing your chest. You're refusing to expose your weakness. Like you're weak, gutless, and you're annoying and you're embarrassing. And you're giving us all a bad name.
Setting the wrong standard for the future.
Just step up, man. Just step up. You want to be in law enforcement. You want to do the things that we have to do. Everybody wants to be a lion until it's time to be a lion, right? To do lion things. But you can't just be posturing and anyways.
That's the hard line. I love that line is everybody wants to be a gangster until it's time to do gangster stuff. And it's like it's 100% accurate though. Everyone wants to look the part until you actually have to do the work. And I mean, a lot of it's not very glamorous. A lot of it just sucks. A lot of it is time consuming. A lot of it is boring. A lot of,
until you learn to like the suck.
Until you learn to like it, and then you can manage it. But I think
screw it. I want it, and that's my point.
Yeah.
Until you learn to manage the suck, and you'll never learn to manage the suck unless you start going embracing the suck.
Yeah.
And if you embrace it enough, then you want the suck. Then you demand the suck. Now I'm unhappy if it doesn't suck. And that's how you build people up to embrace adversity. I was thinking as you were, I have a question for you, Seb, and I don't want to put too fine a point on it because I don't want to put you on the spot. I want to speak theoretical now, mostly. Sure. So I'll give a personal anecdote and then we'll go to the theoretical model. So when I was teaching at the Ontario Police College, they just got a new simulator in. And it was the sexy simulator of the day, brand spanking, and it had all the whizzy little gadgets with it. And I hadn't been there too long, and people kind of knew generally what my background was, but not too much about it. And so they wanted me to enter into this simulator and engage through the process. A bunch of guys had already gone through. But when I stepped into the room was full of people who wanted to see how I managed the situation. And I managed it and took care of that business. And you understand what I'm about to say now. At my level at that time, my ability to process data and shave time was unimaginable to the people who were in that room. They just never really experienced that kind of thing before because again these were very early days. And so when it was all said and done, everyone was kind of looking at me and said, wow, that was amazing. And I said, why? Look at that time. No one's ever said a time like that before. And I looked at them and said, well, you better pick up the pace. And I walked out of the room because that's how we work. That's how the military mindset, at least how I was raised, was to face the problem, execute against it, and then look at the outcome and challenge everyone in the room to, well, get after it, boys. But I don't see that happening so much in the policing world. And so the mindset difference now, this is a theoretical model, the mindset difference being that I like when someone challenges me. And I like throwing it back in their face, not in a mean way, but like, oh yeah, well, guess what? Now it's your turn to pick up your socks. But I don't see that too much as a theoretical model in policing.
Yeah, it depends where you are.
Of course.
It depends where you are, because you're on a team, dude. Like, dude, trust me, that's clarity. No different, right?
Yes. Good clear point. Thank you.
When our team was training with some special teams or special friends, it was back and forth war, right?
Yes,
and the boys, and sometimes it was a green guy that won, and sometimes it was a police green guy that won, right?
Fantastic.
And so that's just the way it should be. We should. But the goal was to work together to make each other better, to challenge each other, and to be able to execute what we have to do in the line of duty with precision, decisiveness, accuracy, and all of those things. But there's only one way to reach that, and that's to actually be willful in your exposure. You have to decide to expose your weaknesses so that you may address them. One thing you said, Shaun, that I really like, that I want to extrapolate a little bit more on, is the whole, like, oh, well, somebody's been doing jiu-jitsu for this long, it takes a long time to get a black belt and all this stuff. Yeah, but it takes one day to be better than yesterday.
100%.
And today, that's tomorrow. Right. And so for me, again, in the spirit of not being black and white, there's all kinds of shades of gray. If you take your abilities from, say, a one stripe white belt to a 3 stripes white belt, you are a different human to deal
Dude,
with.
you're
You're a
Jean-Claude
different
Van Damme
human.
at that point. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So understanding that under pressure and when the hormones start kicking in and it's a live situation now, your belt level is likely to go down 1 or 2. So that's why it's important to continue training, to be continuous with your training. I also, and this is just me, I always encourage cops to compete. It is important. It is important to compete. It changes everything. It does. Because now, for the first time in your entire jiu-jitsu career, somebody is going to come at you 130%, which is exactly what happens on the street. There is no hold back, right? So you don't have to be a champion, this and that, but for you to go on the mats and put yourself in a situation where you are competing against people that don't train at your gym, that don't care about you, and are going to come out, at you the way that people out there are coming out at you. It helps with your stress inoculation. It also helps with the little things that you do with your game that you consistently get away with. Because in competition, it simplifies your game a lot. So it's really, really important, in my opinion, for white, blues, and purple to actually go and compete from time to time. Maybe it's once or twice at every
Go
belt level.
hard.
It really
Every once
doesn't
in a while,
matter.
go hard.
Yeah, and if you don't want to compete, or if you don't, for whatever reason, you're not in a competitive realm, you don't want to do that, that's cool. Well, find somebody that will challenge you and have a mutual arrangement. Like, hey man, we're nice and warm now. Let's go. Let's make this
Yeah,
happen.
buddy.
Let's roll and let's really try
Let's
to
test ourselves.
exactly. And so that's such a critical piece of this whole thing. Positional control is where we as cops need to focus our attention. Everybody's worried about submissions. Everybody's worried about this and that and this. Positional control is our problem. And this is where we can start applying the rest of the arrest procedures and TTPs that we have, right?
Yeah.
If positional control is a concern, which it should be maybe the primary concern,
Yes.
for any police officer out there, if you've never spent a minute trying to control your partner up against the wall and keep them against a wall to control their movement against a wall, I encourage you to try it, because it ain't that easy. And in that 1 minute or 60 seconds, you'll learn a few things. But let's pretend for a moment my idea of every police service, because I run Canada right now, every police service is going to do 10 minutes every morning before your shift. So if that is an impossibility, which it probably is, then you could start a little thing within your own organization, an informal thing where it's not that you're testing each other. It's just that you're running some scenarios to see how you will react and how your partner will react. You get into a car with your partner for the first time, you don't know how they're going to react. But the moment that you touch them, you know how they're going to react. So you're teaching someone how to maybe move better as a human in those moments, but you're also learning about who your partner is in the moment, which is quite important. But let's sweep all of that out of the way and pretend that there's no way you would ever want to get involved with that, because maybe it'll expose you. Maybe you'll feel vulnerable to the fact that you don't know how to control another human being. Well, there's a really cool place called the BJJ Club, where everyone who goes to the BJJ Club is every day exposed to their inabilities to control other human beings. I get on the mat, my own son exposes me to my inability to control him as a trained adversary. And we've been rolling together for 8 years. He can do what he wants to do to me, and sometimes I can't stop it. And conversely, it's the other way around. So if you don't want to expose yourself in front of teammates, go expose yourself with other people who regularly expose themselves every night on the mats.
For sure. And I think one of the things that comes really instinctively to cops is to identify themselves, because they like to know who's friendly and who isn't, right? The fact is, who cares?
Who
Like,
cares?
as long as you're not in a gym packed with knuckleheads. Like
Jerks.
you get, and it's easy now with Google reviews and whatever. Like if it's a case, like you'll know immediately. So a lot of those clubs are very police friendly and all this stuff. And you can, if you want to disclose this, you can tell the owner, but you certainly don't have to go around. And you can tell the owner, look, I want to be discreet about what I do for a living. Maybe I have UC aspiration, or maybe I don't want people to just know that I'm in law enforcement, or whatever the case may be. It doesn't matter. Go do the work. Don't tell anybody you're a cop. You don't have to. You don't have to give them your address, your phone number, your Instagram account. Like, you can be very and you know what? At some point, once you've done it for so long with them, you'll be comfortable with sharing some information, and you'll learn to trust. You'll make some build some relationships, that kind of stuff. Let's deal with that later. But when you start, if exposure is an issue, limit the amount of pressure that you put on yourself by telling somebody, I'm a cop. Because now that person is like, oh, well, you should have some sort of ability, obviously, and all this stuff. And now it's all pressure that you put on yourself, and it prevents you from learning.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, we've had some Leos show up at our mats here in Roslyn, and it doesn't go the way they expect, because they show up with some preordained ideas that are based in fantasy, and none of that plays out until you first do BJJ. Once you do BJJ, you'll realize how all of your ideas don't count for anything. But here's what happens. If they stay on the mats, they get my respect. If they bounce, I respect them a little less.
Yep.
And I know that sounds maybe judgmental or whatever, but man, if you were a tier 1 guy and you don't know how to hold a pistol, come on. And so if you are in the game of law enforcement and you don't know how to control another human being, come on. Do 10 sessions. 10 sessions is better than 1 session. And 1 session is not enough of a read on what it means to do that martial art to be able to better understand whether you should do another 9. Do 10 at a minimum, and then make your assessment.
I got a great example of this, and it's kind of humorous. It's not about police, but on Thursday night we had 3 new people show up at the club, and we have one of our, I think he's a 1-stripe white belt. He's been doing it for about a year. He's doing really well, but he's also in his 60s. He's got some injuries, all these things, right? And he shows up every class, and he keeps coming, and he keeps doing really well. And then, but he's getting cranked by all of us, right? All the purple belts, the blue belts, and the higher. Like, he gets beat all the time. And so we had these 3 new guys show up on Thursday, and for the first time, I saw this guy smiling while he was rolling, right? Because all of a sudden, he was in control, and that was it. It was a year, maybe, of training, and he was able to easily control these brand new people who had no training, and they were 20, 30, 40 years his junior, and he was just dancing around them, even as a 1-stripe white belt. It is that fast, and it is that effective. So yeah, if you don't know jiu-jitsu,
even a year,
right?
Give me a week,
right? Like, just a little bit of control,
a week, and they'll be able to control the week.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Jiu-jitsu is a superpower. It is a superpower. There's nothing in the martial arts world that is even close to this. There's a lot of good martial arts out there, but what I am saying is this: if I took cops that are strong guys, physically in shape and everything, that fought on the ice as goons or whatever, and in fighting on the ground, I literally might as well have been fighting my daughter. Like,
it's almost boring.
It just there was no elevation of heart rate.
Yeah.
It's like, you're not even causing me a little bit of issues at all. Like, I will manhandle you. And it's important they understand that. One thing I just wanted to address because we're getting close, and I know we're going to wrap up soon, but one of the things, I was listening to your guys' episode with Sam, and some was kind of brought up, and Sam, it was a really good episode, by the way, and I really appreciated all the input. But one of the things that I think we as cops, and some of the defensive tactics and the combative instructors out there are sometimes doing a disservice and taking hard lines on things, too many hard lines. And you have to be very careful when you do that. So I have instructors out there, the combative instructors, going around saying, you never do body locks. Wrong. absolutely wrong. There's all kinds of times to do body locks if they're implemented properly in the right set of circumstances. Sacrifice throws. Guess what a sacrifice throw is? Sacrifice throw isn't your primary takedown method. It isn't your secondary takedown method. It is a tertiary freaking break the glass in case of fire.
Yeah, because I had nothing
mechanism.
else.
What if the person gets a double blast or a double leg on you? Now what? Your best chance of surviving that is to turn it into a sacrifice throw. If the person grabs your single, it's the same. You're going to go with a single leg butterfly, flip him over, and now you're on top. So, to say like, and I know like what Sam was saying, it was in the context of policing, but in the context of policing, and even in the context of competing in jiu-jitsu, sacrifice throws are extremely valuable. They should not be your primary takedown methods, right? And so sometimes we have to be careful as instructors with the always or never, because
contextualizing.
it causes issues, all kinds of issues.
That's a great point. So I got a couple of comments here that I want to hit before we shut her down here, but
sure.
I do really appreciate the conversation. This has been fantastic. So right off the bat, Winterstorm asked this earlier. Is that a new collective merch idea? Burning cow scented candles? Maybe we could probably do that. Daniel does say people forget how it was many years ago during the hunter-gatherer times, just more refined now. And I did want to hit on this, and I said it earlier, and I wanted to refine it even more. It's not a question of forgetting. People have not been exposed to it. Period. Right? I know people in the city who have lived their lives entirely in the city. They don't know anything about a farm because they've never been to one. And I think it's the same thing with user force. It's the same thing with farming and ranching. You have to expose yourself to these things to understand them. And as Shaun says, you can't just dabble. You got to actually get into it. The River Viking says, "Who let Satch in?" Afternoon, lads. And Satch says, "I snuck in with a fake ID. Don't tell Seb." So and then there's the last couple I'm going to hit right here. Daniel says, "A requirement for real-time training at a higher rate than once a year is lacking in many systems." The same issue in the military medical field. It's the same issue across the board, I think, in the military.
Sure,
it's lip service, man. It's checking a box once a 100%. Year. It's like, yeah, we got her done. I'll see you next year. It's embarrassing.
I think my first 4 or 5 years, I did one shoot a year as just a general, hey, we need to be qualified. And it was pretty crazy because we were fighting in Afghanistan at the point in time. It was insane. Daniel, and then he says, importance of having self-humility every time when it comes to training. Remove showboating and looking like an idiot. 100%. You can't look like an idiot if you don't feel like an idiot.
You can't look like an idiot if you can look like next to me.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm the idiot making you look good. So there you go.
And then last one, Titanium Shinbone. First day with the Halifax Police on Thursday. Appreciate you, Seb. Took lots of inspiration from you. Well, Titanium Shinbone.
Thanks,
Wicked.
brother. I appreciate that.
Some.
It means a lot.
Hey, you know what? With a call sign like Titanium Shinbone,
he's probably a TIE fighter.
Dude, that's what I was going to say. I don't know why he's considering BJJ. Just needs to blast out some Muay Thai kicks.
No. You need BJJ. Trust me. Yeah. This is coming from a guy that trained in Thailand and watched like guys with 400 fights get submitted by blue belts.
Oh, I know. I'm just teasing, of course.
Of course.
Could you imagine the optics of just randomly coming up on a person and then just a flying side? Wham! That would not look good as a police officer. Any final thoughts before we shut her down? Seb, you got anything?
Sure. I wanna follow up on that, man. I'm a long time Muay Thai and Let Wave, practitioner. That's been my love, my biggest love before BJJ. And guys, ground isn't everything. You need to have the ability to take the hits, to dodge, to create some angles, to do things on the stand-up realm, because fights don't start on the ground. You're not going to be butt scooting. You're not going to be any of that. You're going to have to close the gap. And if you close the gap with somebody that knows what they're doing in the stand-up realm, your black belt in jiu-jitsu is not going to help you if they connect. So you need to have a well-rounded skill set as a cop to effect arrest properly.
I love that. Shaun, any final thoughts?
Yeah, real quick. I have done a little bit of Muay Thai myself and engaged in it in practical terms. And so the one thing that you should understand if you've never done the art is if you ever get cracked by an elbow in tight, it's going to change your world. And so the other aspect to that is, as you're realizing that your world is in real time changing, if you've never been cracked before, guess what? Every idea that you've ever had, every plan that you've ever thought just went out the window. Because the moment that you get cracked for the first time and you see blood pouring on your vest or whatever, it's a whole different thing that you have to work through. And that is not the time to work through it. So get in front of it by training hard on stand up and on ground so that you are comfortable when it happens for the first time.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I think Mike Tyson said it. Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. Yeah.
Yep.
You
And
do.
Enzo Gracie says, you know, a black belt after being punched in the face is a brown belt being punched in the face, a purple belt being so there is a reality there. Hey guys,
100%.
on this, there's a show, and I will have to put I'll give you the link, but there is a show, a self-defense show. I posted a knife attack defense video. So basically, they took MMA fighters and people from all kinds of walks of life, all martial artists, and they put them into real life self-defense scenarios. It is one of the best show I've ever watched in terms of like seeing what actually happens.
Nice.
And it is crazy. I'll send you the link.
Let's get that in the show notes.
Put it in.
For
It's
sure.
so good, man.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. Awesome. Well, as we learn how to be humble, that allows us to build our own capabilities through training, which allows us to grow as better fighters, better police officers, better military, better people in general. So if you want to learn, build, and grow with us, do so every day here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.
If I could hit the